Welcome everybody back to the stream. Today we're doing a little session on getting animations onto a website. So this is a little technique I learned working on my portfolio, transferring them to Webflow. And basically what we have here is an animation of a geometry that I can just scroll on the website for, and it plays an animation essentially. It's not actually rotating a 3D model, although it looks like that. But it's actually just scrolling through frames playing through frames as I scroll through the page. So we got this out of Blender. Basically, I set up this file here with a bunch of different shapes that I wanted to render to use for my website. And all it is taking a camera or setting up some sort of animation. In this case, all I did was rotate the object. So if we get rid of everything but the prism, or the icosphere, really is what it is. It's just a primitive geometry made into a wireframe. And it looks purple, but it actually renders black. If we get into the camera, this is all it is, and a rotation on the keyframes so that at the end it actually meets its original position. So, you know, not a this video or this stream isn't really a beginner's tutorial. I've covered this before, and there's tons of videos out there on how to keyframe these simple things on the properties area. But yeah, all I messed with was rotation, set a safe place, and you do want to set your renderer to use down here on film, making sure that transparent is turned on right here. Film transparent under your render properties. So that's going to give you a PNG, if you save as a PNG file, that has a clear background. And that's what we want for a website at least, so it doesn't interfere with anything else, so there's no like white background. It's just the object on itself. And this actually is a key thing as well. This is what works best for Lotties, or these type of animations that we see playing on a website, because it's going through so many images. The lighter the image data, the better. So I found that like anything over 15 megabytes is going to be way too much. So anyway, also use a resolution that works well, like don't do overkill. But once you have all your frames, essentially, you get over into After Effects and oops. Tribute mesh. There we go. I don't know at what point I accidentally switched over the screen. Well, in any case, this is what that animation was. So we're going through those keyframes. I'll have to splice later something over what I'm talking about that area. But in any case, hey there EM, hey there Generalite in the chat. Thanks for dropping in. So we're in After Effects, and once we have all our frames for an animation, we double click here in basically our section for our project section where all our assets are stored. And this is an animation I did for Vaco Studio on a product they worked on for marketing purposes called Casetify, if you guys want to look them up. But anyway, these are way too many frames, 300 PNGs. This is going to end up being a really heavy model. But if I just go for, say, like a 180 turn, like if I cap it at like 100 frames, that still is going to be pretty heavy, but you know, we'll work with it. So important here is to uncheck PNG sequence, and on the import options, create composition. So we hit import on all those files that we want, and it'll just load them in. And then this next section pops up with a little window that says new composition from selection. So what we do is use the dimensions from the image, and the still duration should just be 1 unit here of time, like the smallest it can be. And sequencing layers checked, but no overlap. So when you do that, it just loads in all your frames, or all your images as just one single frame in the animation. And it makes the whole composition the size of the animation. So this is essentially what's going to play on the website, and you can set that play action to happen when you scroll. To get this out of After Effects and into the website, we actually need a plugin that you can get from the Creative Cloud library. If I can open that up quickly enough. but your plugin is going to end up under Window, Extensions, Lottie Files, or Body Movin'. I've been using Body Movin', but either has worked fine. And once that loads, because it's kind of reading what's up going on in the file, you have this little window. And a few settings we do need to set up are just where you're going to save your frames. So here's one for me. I'll create a Lottie case. Save that. So yeah, you set a directory there, and then you go to settings, scroll down, and find your assets section right here. We want to enable compression. So this is how much it's going to reduce the quality of the image, which we do kind of need. It'll keep the same file format from the original, but we do need to compress in order to get the file as small as possible. So I'll just overshoot it a little bit, or down to 45. Depending on what you're rendering, you might not have to compress that much. And then include in JSON. So we need to check this so that essentially the JSON file, which is what the Lottie exports as, has all the images source so that it can play on the website. Otherwise, it won't work if you're using image files, because Lottie animations could also just be vector, could also just be like shapes and lines moving around. So if it's images, you have to include those attachments onto the file. With that done, we select it and we do render. And we see rendering layer phone case. And it's gonna take a little bit. But at this time, if there's any questions that you want to show up in the chat or anything you'd like to drop into the chat, always welcome. But yeah, we'll be able to just replace this in Webflow. So this is actually the Webflow previewer. I can get out of preview like that. I just have a section here. I made the section 2 view heights worth of height. So basically when we're scrolling down, we're scrolling twice the height of whatever native resolution screen the website's being viewed on. But that contains the Lottie animation so that it stays in place as you scroll. And we can go over to the settings, replace Lottie sequence. This is now Webflow specific, but yeah, we're still exporting images, about halfway there. I wanted to find where my Lottie animation was, but I just remembered I could always just copy it from the directory that shows up here. I guess as we wait, I could show off the use case that I had for this shape. So it's not finished, but what the heck. Let's see a little preview of the website I've been working on. So there's 2 Lotties going on here. Now I've showed this to peer review for some people, but still not quite yet ready to be fully reviewed. But works on my phone, works on my tablet, works on my website. Doesn't work on everybody's tablet, laptop, and phone. But as I scroll through, I have one Lottie animation zooming in to that scene right there. And as that Lottie animation is playing, there's that shape that we're using for this tutorial. You'll notice the cursor inverts as well. And then we have a full shot. And this is where we start moving on to some of the content. So yeah, some of this layout and effects animations aren't fully optimized for everything yet. But yeah, the concept here was to basically use a Lottie animation in the beginning to go from a very simple minimalistic homepage, animate into what the experience is of checking out a facade of a building as if you're going through different levels of it, and each level is a different piece of the story or a different piece of the portfolio. And then all the way at the bottom, here's some more shapes from that render file that aren't animated, but they just chase the cursor, and then the project page. But yeah. All right, our render finished. We'll hit done, and I just want to copy where I saved that so I can open it, oops, in my Finder. Oops, lost it. Go back, select destination, copy it up from here, and then paste it into the Finder. There we go. Go back into Webflow, Under settings for that Lottie animation, we can just hit replace Lottie sequence, which I think I already did. And then it just opens your assets on the left. You just drag in our new file. I should check. Okay, nice. We're just under 10 megabytes. So that should load all right. Cool. Now we preview the site and I'm scrolling around the phone. We can actually do the full 360 because you'll notice the quality, even though it's compressed, still pretty good. And I've set it up so that if I zoom in, the phone, so what I'm doing here is if I zoom in a lot, it doesn't necessarily change the size of the phone. Like, oops, there we go. Browser's too small. Like zooming in and out of the browser. And the phone just stays the same size because that's how I set it up to happen. So when you do a quality compression like that and you can ensure that the phone is always going to be seen, or the image is always going to be seen in a certain way, then you can hit just exactly what you need so that your file size is exactly what it should be for quality and performance. Generally, it says in the chat, not familiar with this workflow. You ever get to cases where you want to do something but there's no command for it? I've shied away from Squarespace and WordPress for that reason. Had that problem with Adobe Portfolio too. So I've used all of that and Wix and maybe a couple others. This is my first project on Webflow, this one here, and I'll say like I restarted my site 3 or 4 times, but the cool thing is you kind of copy things from other people. So is there something that I want to do? I imagine you're asking for the website. Is there something that I want to do for the website that I want to make happen and there's no command for it? So the way I went about it was actually looking through a whole bunch of examples. I probably spent just as much time looking through websites, and I probably copied around 30, 40 what are called like clonables. They're kind of like, they can be templates, but they can also just be web pages that you add to your editor. You copy paste, but then you have to sort of also reverse engineer a lot of what someone else did on your own site. So I kind of, yeah, like I had that concept in mind for what I wanted to do for my homepage, but this is totally different than what I initially mapped out. Like the point was to experience scrolling or traveling through a space as you are told a story. So then I had to marry what my mockup was and what my initial like idea or concept was with what I had available. And there was a lot of trial and error. That's why I restarted so much, because I made a mess out of sites. But yeah, it was more so like, yeah, there was some stuff that there was stuff I wanted to do. I just didn't know how to do it. I think you can pretty much do anything in Webflow. It's just like, how creative can you get, and can you code? But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, or you're talking more specifically about commands for Blender. But from your context, I understood website. So that's my answer to website. I guess on the Blender end, I mean, in this case, it was simple, so I imagine that's not your question. But I think if I knew Webflow better, Webflow, if I knew more After Effects, or I followed some After Effects tutorial or used some templates for animations, you can then have like, you know, other stuff going on at the same time as your Blender animation, kind of comping this from 3D into the 2D here in After Effects. So I mean, from Blender to what you end up experiencing on the website, you know, there's a lot of flexibility there. Same to the adjusting the initial vision to reality. Yeah, same in adjusting the initial vision to reality. Doing 3 software projects, and my ignorance definitely ropes in the vision. And you were talking about website. Cool. Yeah, man. It's like, what's on the menu, you know, and what's just outside of reach, and what can you do with what's available. But yeah, like I said, like I copied like 20 or 30, which honestly was just a great way to learn too, because there's this stuff on the site that I was building that just wasn't working, and I didn't know why. And maybe at first I still didn't know why, or some things I still don't. But just being like, oh, okay, like this adjustment, this command, this setting, this property or whatever, the fact that you got to go into pages. This took me forever to figure out. So if you're sticking around for Webflow stuff, like there's a head and body tag here for code on your page. There's so much cool stuff that people make that have code attached to it, and I was copying it from their templates or their clonables or whatever and pasting it over, and it just wouldn't work at all. And it turns out like there's graphic stuff on the page, and then there's a bit of code that comes with it embedded here, or sometimes in the thing itself. But then on other stuff, like I think I mean, I'm not an expert on web design, but this is what I've seen in the circles. Like I used WordPress a long time ago, and I found it very limiting, but it was good for like a blog format or portfolio format. And apparently more recently, it's way more developer friendly, way more plugin oriented. So it's like Webflow and WordPress right now is a heated debate. Squarespace is I think it's e-commerce, and then all the other stuff you could do a web page, a landing page, you could do a portfolio. But I think Squarespace excels with maybe not so much e-commerce or more so like business, like having access to analytics or client portals in that sense. But in terms of like creative, like because that's what we're talking about really, is like when it comes to creative, Webflow, probably WordPress through the use of plugins. I think Squarespace and Wix. And what else did you mention? Adobe Portfolio for sure. They're all more locked into how you're meant to build a website according to them, right? Like you can't get so crazy, or you can't get so creative. But they are more straightforward to use, which is the point. Nice. Seems like an HTML interface. Not to take up too much time, but if you haven't ever right-clicked inspected a website, it's a quick way to learn about what's under the hood. Yeah. I have no idea about code. I can understand it, but I can't speak it. But yes, what is it like? Is it F12? Yeah, right-click or F12, and you can see some stuff under the hood. F12 and Google Chrome is what I'm using. But apparently like some kids figured out how to cheat on their test by doing that, because it was like multiple choice, and some kid knew how to do that, and it was like ABC, and there would be one that you could see the options A, B, C, D in the code, and there was one option that was different from the rest, so that had to be the right one. But also, yeah, when you hit publish on a site, you can export, maybe not on publishing, share, invite content editors, export code. There it is. You can export HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and all the assets. So it's just neat, because it's the same thing. If you mock up a website, or if you build up a website, and you need to transfer all the content, you just package up your assets and then just drag them into your new site. So yeah, you can also export or check out all the code from the editor side. But yeah, if I wanted to see the code of a live website, I could do the F12, and there's my code. I think, right? I know half of what I'm very observant, but I don't really understand. Like I don't understand it like like I could just do something with that information. But yeah. Cool. So that was the point of today's stream, kind of going over animations, but you got a little sneak peek of my website as well. But I've been having fun with Webflow. Think I'm gonna build, I think like even just for presentations, like just get a template for Webflow and like build out a design presentation as a website. It's like it's the same amount of work at this point. Yeah. Thank you all for tuning in. If there's the rectangle explains the layout. The rectangle explains the layout. You could also delete parts in real time to see what it affects. Delete parts of, oh yeah. In terms of like breaking down someone else's template, yes. I mean, I'm pretty minimalist-ish. Like I have a lot of 3D stuff or like pops of color. So like when building out like wireframes or presentations, like I try to be very, very minimal because I know the content is going to be really heavy. So yeah, definitely, like for me a strategy is like getting templates and whatnot and just stripping away, like removing until like maybe you've gone too far, and then like undoing, bringing some stuff back. But that's also a great way to just break down what it is that's in front of you. When you were inspecting, sorry if that's unclear, explaining the code. Ah, no worries, man. We can make it happen through the chat. Delete parts in real time to see what it affects. Oh, for the website? Well, I don't want to do it to my portfolio. That's just like Garage. Like I know I'm not actually changing the website, but it's just like a paranoia. Garage XYZ, they're great. Here's their code. Look, it looks like more just differently organized. And if I delete parts, oh wow, yeah, and I can undo. So I can delete the background color. I can delete text color. That would probably break something. But that's interesting. I wonder if I could, I mean, probably not these things because I don't recognize. I mean, I don't even know what I'm looking at, but you have a better idea generally. But if I were to copy, I don't think if I copied any of the stuff, it would work if I brought it into my site as whatever format. Maybe styles. Oh, interesting. Layout. Oh, wow. So you can actually see how it's organized. Sections and div blocks. Yeah. Okay, I do get this. I mean, I know what those are. All right, cool. You learn something every day. Appreciate that. All right, well, with that, I'm signing off, y'all. Gonna catch up on some sleep. Thank y'all for tuning in. Hope you found the animation explanation useful, and also kind of knowing what you can do now with websites, with 3D stuff, 2D stuff, animation. There's a bunch of ways to get stuff on there. Something I could kind of show in some future. I mean, it's pretty simple, but something that could go down tomorrow, I passed it, is Spline, which lets you integrate 3D models into websites. It's kind of like if you know 3GS, it's kind of like a simplified 3GS website creator. But essentially what you need to know is you can upload and integrate your own 3D models into websites. So shout out to Garage, as this is some of the work I've done with them. And here it is in all its glory. So yeah, Spline coming up tomorrow. Appreciate y'all. Have a great night. I'll see you on the next one.